The fence was screaming before I even opened my eyes. I woke up flat on my back in the hay, heart pounding, because the sound coming from the deep pens was not the low hum I heard every night. It was sharp. It was breaking. I sat up and saw sparks jumping along the electro-fence wire like small orange insects, and I knew, in that first second, that something behind that fence was pushing against it on purpose. My name is Rowan, and I was the stable boy of House Draymore, which is a fancy way of saying I shoveled dung and brushed horses that most people in that house would not look at twice. I was 17. I had no family left on this colony, no title, no coins beyond what I earned each week, and no reason at all to be standing near 6 sleeping monsters at the darkest hour of the night. Yet there I was, walking toward the fence instead of running from it, because something inside my chest was pulling me forward like a rope tied around my ribs. The fence died with a final crack, and the night went silent, too silent. Even the crickets stopped. Then the ground moved, not shaking like an earthquake, but pulsing, like something enormous breathing under the soil. 6 shapes rose out of the deep pens at once, unfolding wings that blocked out the stars, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe myself. I should tell you what those pens held, because if you do not know, none of this will make sense. Long before humans came to this world, something else did. Nobody knows what. All we found, when our ships first landed here 200 years ago, were 6 enormous creatures locked in a frozen sleep, wrapped in scales that looked like poured metal, with eyes that held more years than our entire history. We called them wyrms. Some called them dragons, because the old stories from Earth felt close enough. Every noble house on this colony had tried, at some point, to wake one and make it serve them. Every attempt ended the same way. Handlers vanished, pens burned. So the houses stopped trying to wake them, and instead just kept them chained and sedated, treating them like dangerous treasure nobody was allowed to touch. Now they were awake, and the fence that had held them for 2 centuries was gone, and I was standing in the middle of the yard with nothing but a wooden bucket in my hand. The largest of the 6 turned its head toward me. Its eyes were black, but inside that black I could see something moving, like slow currents under a still lake. A voice entered my mind, not through my ears but straight into the center of my skull, calm and enormous. You came again, small one. Even now, with the cage broken, you did not run. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I had heard that voice before, many nights, faint and far away, like a whisper through a wall. I had always thought it was my own imagination, a lonely boy talking to himself in the dark because he had nobody else to talk to. I never once believed it was real. Behind me, lights began flooding the yard as guards spilled out of the barracks, shouting, weapons raised. Lord Callan Draymore, heir to the entire estate, came running in his sleep clothes, his face pale as bone. "Stand down," he shouted at the guards, though his voice cracked halfway through the sentence. "Do not fire. Do not provoke them." Nobody listened. A younger guard, maybe scared out of his mind, raised his rifle and fired a bolt of light straight at the smallest of the 6 wyrms. It struck the creature's shoulder and did nothing at all, not even a scratch. But the worm's head snapped toward the guard with a sound like distant thunder rolling closer. I did the only thing I could think of. I stepped directly between the guard and the wyrm, both arms raised, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through skin and bone. "Stop!" I shouted, though my voice came out thin and shaking. "Please. Nobody here means to hurt you." He was scared, that is all. The great head lowered until we were eye to eye, close enough that I could feel warm air pushing against my face with every breath it took. For 3 long seconds, nobody in that yard breathed at all. Then the voice returned in my mind, gentler this time, almost curious. "You defend the ones who fear you, even now. Even the boy who shovels their filth and receives no thanks for it." I did not know what to say to that, so I said the only true thing I had. "I do not want anyone hurt tonight, not you, not them." The worm pulled back its head slowly, and one by one, the other 5 did the same, folding their enormous wings against their backs like they were choosing, on their own, to stop being a threat. The guards stood frozen, rifles still raised but nobody firing again. Lord Callan pushed his way to the front of the crowd, staring at me like he had never truly seen me before, even though I had worked in his stables for 3 years. "Rowan," he said slowly. "What did you do?" "I did not do anything," I told him honestly. "They are just listening." That was when Dara arrived, running from the kitchens with a lantern swinging wildly in her hand, her dark hair falling loose from its braid. She was the only person on the entire estate who had ever treated me like a person instead of a piece of furniture that happened to talk. She stopped 3 steps away, staring up at the 6 wyrms with wide eyes, then looked at me. "Rowan," she whispered. They are looking at you like you are one of them." I did not have time to answer, because the largest worm spoke again, and this time its voice was loud enough that everyone in the yard heard it inside their own minds at once. Guards dropped their weapons. Lord Callan staggered backward like he had been struck. "We do not choose masters," the voice said. "Your kind tried for 2 centuries to command us with chains and needles and fear, and every attempt ended in failure, because command was never what we wanted. We wanted one who would sit outside our prison and speak to us with nothing to gain. This small one did that, night after night, for 3 years, asking for nothing in return. That is worth more than every crown your houses have ever built." Lord Callan found his voice, though it trembled. "He is a stable boy. He owns nothing. He commands nothing." The wyrm's black eyes turned toward him, unblinking. "And yet he is the only one among your kind who ever earned our trust. Perhaps that tells you something about the value of crowns." I will not pretend the rest of that night was calm. Word spread through the estate faster than fire through dry grass, and by sunrise, messengers had already ridden out to the other houses, carrying news that would change everything. House Draymore had lost control of 6 ancient wyrms, and those wyrms had chosen, of their own will, to follow a stable boy nobody had ever respected. By midday, the courtyard was filled with nobles from 3 neighboring houses, all standing at a careful distance from the wyrms, all staring at me like I was some kind of trick their eyes were playing on them. Among them stood a woman named Petra Ashvale, daughter of the rival house that had spent decades trying and failing to wake even one wyrm from its sleep. She wore armor instead of silk, and her eyes carried none of the fear the others showed, only calculation. "You expect us to believe," she said, walking closer than anyone else dared, "that 6 ancient weapons simply decided to follow a boy who mucks stables because he was kind to them." I did not step back from her, though every instinct told me to. "I did not ask them to follow me," I said. "I only spoke to them because I was lonely, and they listened when nobody else did." Petra studied me for a long moment, then turned to the largest wyrm. "If he commands you, prove it. Have him order you to kneel." The wyrm's head swung toward her slowly, and the voice that answered was cold enough to make the whole courtyard fall silent. "We do not kneel for commands. We stand beside him because he never once demanded that we should." Petra's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more, though the look she gave me before turning away told me clearly that House Ashvale had not finished with this conversation. That look followed me for the rest of the day like a shadow that refused to lift. Over the following weeks, my life turned into something I barely recognized. I was moved out of the stable loft and given rooms inside the manor itself, though I kept sneaking back to the stables at night out of habit, because the silence of a proper bed felt strange after years of sleeping near animals. Tutors were brought in to teach me things I had never learned, reading beyond simple letters, numbers beyond counting coins, the histories of the houses and the old records of the first landing. Lord Callan, to his credit, treated me with a stiff kind of respect that slowly began to soften into something almost like friendship, though I do not think he ever fully understood how 6 ancient minds had chosen a boy with mud still under his fingernails over every noble born and bred for exactly this purpose. Dara visited often, bringing food from the kitchens even though I no longer needed to sneak meals, simply because she said the manor food was too fancy and not filling enough. She was the one person who never once looked at me differently, who still called me Rowan, instead of whispering titles behind my back, and I found myself grateful for that, more than for anything else that had changed. But peace, I learned quickly, does not last long when something valuable suddenly belongs to someone the world considers unworthy of it. 3 weeks after that first night, I woke to the sound of Dara pounding on my door before dawn, her voice sharp with fear. "Rowan, wake up. Something is happening at the pens." I ran through the manor halls barefoot, my heart already racing before I even reached the courtyard, and what I found there stole the breath straight out of my lungs. Smoke curled up from the outer wall near the deep pens, and figures in dark cloaks moved quickly between the shadows, carrying tools I did not recognize but instantly understood were not meant for anything gentle. Guards shouted across the courtyard, but the intruders moved faster, slipping toward the largest wyrm, which lay still on the ground, its enormous chest rising and falling slowly, clearly weakened by something. I did not think. I ran straight toward them, shouting at the top of my lungs, and one of the cloaked figures turned toward me, with a small device raised in one gloved hand, a device I recognized instantly, because I had seen similar tools used to sedate horses that grew too wild to handle safely. "Get back," the figure snapped, voice muffled beneath the hood. "This does not concern you, stable boy." "It concerns me completely," I said, planting myself directly in front of the weakened wyrm. "Whatever you are doing to it, You will have to go through me first. The figure hesitated, just for a moment, clearly not expecting resistance from someone so far beneath them in station. That hesitation was enough. Guards from House Draymore arrived at a full run, and the cloaked figures scattered into the darkness, leaving behind only the small device that had been used to weaken the great wyrm's strength. Lord Callan arrived moments later, breathing hard, staring down at the device with a face gone pale with fury. "This bears the mark of House Ashvale," he said quietly. Petra grows impatient. I knelt beside the largest wyrm, placing a hand gently against its enormous side, feeling the slow rhythm of its breathing beneath my palm. "Will it recover?" I asked, my voice smaller than I meant it to sound. The voice that answered inside my mind was weaker than before, but still steady. "It will recover, small one, though it seems your kind has not yet finished testing whether kindness can survive greed." That night, word arrived that House Ashvale had formally challenged House Draymore's right to the wyrms, demanding a public trial before the ruling council of all the colony houses, a trial where ownership of the 6 ancient creatures would be decided once and for all. I was told, plainly, that I would need to stand before that council myself, because no wyrm would speak on behalf of anyone but me. The journey to the council chamber took 2 full days by transport, crossing open plains where the estate's tall walls gave way to nothing but grass and distant hills. Lord Callan insisted I travel with an armed escort, though I noticed he chose the route himself, avoiding the main roads that most houses used, saying quietly that too many eyes had already turned toward this journey. We were less than an hour from the chamber when the transport lurched sideways without warning, throwing me hard against the window. The driver shouted something I could not understand, and through the glass I saw 3 smaller vehicles closing in fast from both sides, their markings scraped away deliberately, leaving nothing but bare metal. "Down!" Callan barked, pulling me low against the seat as something struck the side of the transport with a sound like a hammer against a bell. "Ashvale colors. No, they have hidden them, but I know that driving pattern. This is no accident." The transport swerved hard, tires screaming against the dirt road, and I gripped the seat with both hands as the world outside blurred into streaks of green and gray. One of the pursuing vehicles pulled alongside us, and a figure leaned out with the same kind of device I had seen used against the wyrm weeks earlier, aimed now not at a creature twice the size of a house, but directly at me. I felt something shift in my mind then, distant but unmistakable, a presence pushing gently against my thoughts from far away. "We feel your fear, small one. Hold on. We are not so far as you think." I did not have time to wonder how that was possible. The pursuing vehicle drew closer, close enough that I could see the driver's grim expression through the glass, when the sky above us darkened suddenly, as though a cloud had rolled in from nowhere at incredible speed. It was not a cloud. It was wings, 6 pairs of them, descending fast enough to bend the tall grass flat in every direction. The pursuing vehicles scattered instantly, tires skidding in every direction as their drivers abandoned the chase rather than face what had just arrived above them. Our transport slowed to a stop, and I climbed out on shaking legs to find the largest wyrm landing gently in the road ahead, its enormous form somehow careful not to crush the grass beneath its claws. "You could have simply warned them to stay away from me sooner," I said, half laughing from relief, half still trembling from fear. "We wished to see how far your courage would carry you first," the voice answered, though there was something almost gentle beneath the words, like affection wrapped inside old wisdom. "It carried you far enough, small one, further than most." Lord Callan stared up at the creature with an expression somewhere between awe and exhaustion, then turned to me with a tired smile. "Remind me never to underestimate a stable boy again," he said. The rest of the journey passed without further incident, the 6 wyrms flying steady overhead the whole way, casting long shadows across the road like a promise nobody dared test twice. By the time we reached the council chamber, word of the failed ambush had already spread ahead of us, and I noticed several representatives from other houses watching me, with new expressions as I walked in, no longer simple curiosity, but something closer to respect, earned rather than given freely. The council chamber itself, when I finally stood inside it, was larger and colder than anything I had ever seen, filled with representatives from every house on the colony, all seated in rings of polished stone benches that rose higher and higher toward the ceiling. Petra Ashvale stood near the front, her expression calm and confident, clearly certain that a stable boy would crumble under this kind of pressure. The head of the council, an old woman named Isolde Marrow, called the chamber to order and turned her sharp eyes toward me. "You claim these creatures follow you willingly," she said. "Prove it. Command them to demonstrate their loyalty, here, before this council." I stood very still, feeling every eye in that chamber pressing against me like weight. "I will not command them," I said. and my voice, to my own surprise, came out steady. I have never commanded them, not once. They are not tools to prove ownership. If you want proof, ask them yourselves. A murmur rippled through the chamber, and Isolde's eyebrows rose slightly, though whether from surprise or approval I could not tell. She turned toward the doors, where the 6 wyrms waited outside the chamber, too large to enter, their presence still somehow filling the entire room through the open archway. "Very well," she said. "Let them speak for themselves." The voice that answered came from all 6 at once, filling the chamber with a weight that pressed against every wall and every listening mind. "For 2 centuries, your houses chained us, drugged us, and studied us like objects, seeking only power. Every attempt to command us ended in failure, because you never once understood what we required. This boy asked us for nothing. He came in darkness, alone, and spoke to us as equals, expecting no reward. When danger came for us, he stood between us and harm without hesitation, though he had nothing to gain and everything to lose. We do not follow him because he commands us. We follow him because he is the first among your kind in 200 years who never once tried to own us." Silence filled the chamber for a long moment. Petra's confident expression finally cracked, just slightly, and she opened her mouth as though to argue, but Isolde raised one hand, silencing her before a single word could escape. "The council recognizes the choice made by beings far older than any house represented in this room," Isolde announced, her voice carrying easily across the stone benches. "Ownership in this matter belongs to no house. It belongs to trust freely given, and trust freely given cannot be challenged, bought, or stolen." Petra's jaw tightened, but she said nothing further, and I watched the fight drain slowly out of her posture as she realized, perhaps for the first time, that this particular battle had never truly been hers to win. Walking out of that chamber into the bright afternoon sun, I felt something settle inside my chest that I had never felt before, not once in 17 years, a quiet certainty that I finally belonged somewhere, not because of any title given to me, but because of choices I had made freely, night after night, long before anyone thought I mattered at all. Dara was waiting outside the chamber doors, grinning wide enough that it nearly split her face in two. "Well, Mudhands," she said, using the old nickname with obvious affection instead of mockery, "it seems you are somebody now." I laughed, a real laugh, the first one that felt fully mine and longer than I could remember. "I was always somebody," I told her. "Nobody just bothered to notice until 6 ancient wyrms decided to speak up for me." Life after that day never returned to what it once was, and I would be lying if I said every difficulty simply vanished the moment the council made its decision. Old habits of doubt do not disappear overnight, and there were still nobles who looked at me sideways, still whispers in hallways I was not meant to hear. But every evening when the sun sank low over the estate, I walked out to the open fields where the 6 wyrms now rested freely, no longer chained, no longer hidden behind fences that hummed with warning, and I sat among them exactly as I always had, asking for nothing, expecting nothing, simply grateful for the company of something that had chosen me long before the rest of the world ever thought to look my way. The largest of them lowered its head one evening, resting it gently in the grass beside me, close enough that I could see galaxies of old starlight still swimming somewhere deep inside its ancient eyes. "You never ask us for greatness, small one," the voice said softly, "yet greatness found you regardless." I reached out and placed my hand against its enormous scale, feeling the steady warmth beneath, and smiled at the quiet truth of it. Maybe that is exactly why it did.